say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
The invocation will be given by the Reverend Dr. A. Hunter Colpitts, minister of the High Street United Methodist Church of Muncie.
Let us pray. Eternal God, whose thoughts are above our thoughts, and whose way is beyond our way, and yet who does call us to think your thoughts and walk in your ways, we invoke the blessings of your presence to be with us in this hour. We recognize before thee that this occasion has different meanings for different people, but for all may it represent a growth experience. Growth in appreciation for the loyal support of family, friends, and school. Growth in a clear understanding of the stuff out of which alone the good life can emerge. Growth in gratitude for a nation whose foundations include integrity, inquiry, and courage. May this day symbolize for all the hope for and faith in a future in which personal honesty, personal responsibility, and personal courage will be the foundation of our corporate life. To the honor of thy holy name and the good of all humankind, we pray. Amen.
Graduates, members of the faculty, parents, relatives, and friends, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this, the 68th commencement of Ball State University. The music today is being provided by Mr. Kirby Coriath of our music faculty. The singing of the national anthem was led by Mr. F. Lemuel Anderson, also of our music faculty. And I again acknowledge the participation of the Reverend Dr. Colpitts, who gave the invocation. We are particularly pleased to have with us for this commencement 6 of the 7 members of the Ball State University Board of Trustees. I would like to call their names and ask them to stand, and please remain standing until all the names are called, and might I ask you, the audience, to withhold applause until all have been introduced. First of all, the President of the Board of Trustees, Dr. Alexander M. Bracken of Muncie. The Vice President of the Board, Mr. Tom Wallace of Indianapolis. Mrs. Robert O'Malley of Richmond, Assistant Secretary of the Board. Mr. M. Thomas Harrison of Columbus. Mr. F. Edwin Schoweiler of Fort Wayne, and Dr. Dean Spiker of Osceola. Would you please join me in recognizing these trustees? Thank you. I hasten to add that Mr. Will Parker of Muncie, Secretary of the Board, had planned to be with us, but regrettably at the last moment was unable to be present. And I would just like to say to you that all of us who are members of this university family are inclined on too many occasions, I think, to take for granted the fact that there are people who serve as trustees. This is a most dedicated group. They are vitally interested in this institution, answer every call for assistance, ask good questions. They began their work today at 8 o'clock this morning, for example, in a formal meeting, and I am most grateful for their continued support and guidance. There are others on this platform I should like to recognize at this time, and again, would you please withhold your applause until all have been introduced. Dr. Richard W. Burkhardt, Vice President for Instructional Affairs and Dean of Faculties. Dr. Robert P. Bell, Vice President for Business Affairs and Treasurer. Dr. Merrill C. Byrell, Vice President for Student Affairs and Dean of Students. Dr. Oliver C. Bum, Vice President for Public Affairs and University Development. Dr. Victor B. Lawhead, Dean of Undergraduate Programs. Dr. Robert H. Kenker, Dean of the Graduate School. And of course, Mr. Anderson and Dr. Colpitts. Would you join me in expressing appreciation of these folks as well? We're privileged to have with us today as our speaker Dr. Arthur G Henson, president of our distinguished sister institution, Purdue University. A native of Wisconsin, Dr. Hansen began his Hoosier experience as a young, handsome Marine when he was sent to Purdue as an engineering student in the V-12 program during World War II. The handsome part of that, Dr. Hansen, came from some friends of yours, and I concur. Both his baccalaureate and master's degrees were conferred by the institution he now serves as its president. He took his advanced graduate studies at the University of Maryland and what was then Case Institute of Technology, now Case Western Reserve University. His PhD in mathematics was awarded by the latter institution. Dr. Hansen's professional experience includes aeronautical research at the Lewis Flight Propulsion Laboratory of NASA in Cleveland, Ohio, head of the nucleonics section of the Cornell Aeronautical Laboratory in Buffalo, New York. His teaching experience includes John Carroll University, Baldwin Wallace College, Tuskegee Institute, the University of Michigan, where he was chairman of the Department of Mechanical Engineering, and Georgia Institute of Technology, which he served as Dean of the College of Engineering prior to his selection as president of that institution. After 2 years as president of Georgia Tech, he returned to his alma mater, Purdue University, as president in 1971. A member of numerous professional and honorary societies in mathematics and engineering, Dr. Hansen has published extensively and has served as a consultant to a number of the nation's major industrial firms and governmental agencies. Dr. Hansen's background and experience have prepared him well for the challenges he faces as the first alumnus to serve Purdue University as president. As a presidential colleague, I appreciate and enjoy the opportunity to work with him. He is an intelligent and articulate analyst of the world of higher education today. He is a perceptive observer of a society with many problems. He is a thoroughly competent administrator. Most of all, however, I value his down-to-earth, person-centered approach to his fellow human beings. Graduates, ladies and gentlemen, it is with personal pride and pleasure that I present to you now Dr. Arthur G Henson, president of Purdue University. Dr. Hansen.
President Pruis, distinguished members of the platform party, parents, wives, spouses, husbands, friends, and most of all, graduates. May I personally congratulate you on having come to this very high moment in your career. Perhaps I should begin my remarks to this group by turning to President Pruis and saying, you're handsome too, John. I mean, you really are. It is a pleasure to be here at one of our sister institutions in the state of Indiana, and one of which we are all very, very proud, and especially proud again not to just simply pass compliments back, Dr. Pruis, but for the leadership that you have given to this particularly fine institution. I'd like to take you back for a moment in time, back to the year 1831 in the month of May. On the shores of the United States, a young man has just arrived from France. And the name of this young fellow is Alexis De Tocqueville. And he is to remain in the United States for 9 months. And during that time, young Alexis is to talk, to travel, and to gain impressions of this very new nation, this new democracy. And after 9 months, he again returns to his native France to sit down and put into words all that he has seen, all that he has found in this new United States. And from that, from his writing, will come a classic book called Democracy in America. I suspect that many of you have read de Tocqueville's monumental work, this tremendous insight into the United States in its early years. As one reads that book today, one has a feeling of appreciation for this democracy, this new, struggling nation, an understanding of its people, but most of all, I would say, through the pages of this book, a sense of optimism. He goes back to his Europe, his native France, and he says there is much to watch over there. There's a whole new ferment, set of ideas developing in the United States. Watch it with interest, because it may be the forerunner of how our particular governments should be structured. The year again was 1831. Now let's suppose almost 140 years later that a second Alexis de Tocqueville were to come back to our shores. And today he were to go out to the cities, countryside of the United States and try to gain an impression of what this nation is like today. Would he write the same thing? Would he come back with de Tocqueville's optimism, sense of future? And my answer, I guess, to that would be, I doubt it. It would be particularly interesting if that new reporter were to read our newspapers and in particular look at our opinion polls, the Harris poll, the Gallup poll, you choose it. And from that, conclude as to how we view our institutions. And the answer would be a far different thing than what Alexis de Tocqueville saw or realized or sensed. Because he would find, for instance, that this people today, as surveyed, have very little faith in their institutions. And that, moreover, their faith is declining. Very interesting study made by the Harris Corporation, based on its polls going back to 1971, 1972, told about how we viewed our institutions and professions. I think the highest ranking at that time, back in the year 1971-72, was the medical profession. People trusted the doctors. Over 50% did, over half. Most recent poll says that even that rating is no longer in the 50% or higher category. And you go down from there. Those who agree that the government, be it the legislative branch or the executive branch, is doing a particularly good job, was down in the lower 20%. 80% of our people did not have any strong enthusiasm or faith in our governmental structure. And so one sees the beginning of negativism widely spread. And then we are told about our economic future. and we hear about inflation and all that is happening there and the decline in productivity. And we hear leaders saying the problem could be solved. We could get back on the track, except we don't believe that the American people have the courage to do it. Gasoline rationing recently was a good case in point, or the cutback, and the decrease of the speed limit. And there were those who said it'll never work. We cannot discipline ourselves enough to do it. And then we are told that we must be given, instead of that, more regulations, more controls, and more laws, because we really can't trust our fellow citizens. Let's make more laws and more regulations because our fellow citizens are not dependable. And then finally, there are those who will say we have lost a sense of morality, that as a consequence, the ends justify the means. And that theme has been played over and over again relative to our recent political exposés in Washington. And so if that writer, that young person, were to go back to France or wherever he might come from and write, it might be a new democracy in America, but it would not be like de Tocqueville's. I would suspect that. If, again, what that person saw, listened to, the people he spoke to, were of this negativism-oriented population. And yet the concerns that I have just voiced are not novel or new. They've been with us in times past as well. We have gone through many crises like we are going through now. But I think, however, that there is a more serious situation than we have perhaps faced in the past. And with that as a background, you will hear today many, many brave speeches being made, much political rhetoric about the future. We are told that the time has come to improve our national situation, that every recent fault in the political affairs of our country has been cited as the reason that we must do so and do so now. But my fear is that we will pay too little heed to these expectations, because more often than not, one has the feeling that we're hearing rhetoric and that we've heard that rhetoric before. And every fall as a campaign approaches, you hear this. And it kind of falls off of us like water off a duck's back. We say, we've heard that claim before. And somebody promising us more than has ever been promised before. And yet it is my belief that in spite of the rhetoric that we hear, there is time, there must be time for serious thought. Because the problems that we face transcend the moment, and in my opinion are far more deep than the most recent headlines from Washington. They are serious and they run deep. And so I would share with you this morning, you graduates, a few hopes that I have, a few wishes for you, and concomitantly some concerns. First of all, a hope and wish, my own. I would hope that we would quickly recover a sense of both self and national pride. And I wonder sometimes if we can picture ourselves as being descendants of the same people who braved the long and fearful ocean voyages to come to these shores. I wonder if some of you have seen the movie The Immigrants. If you haven't, I recommend it highly, because it is a story of some of those early pioneers coming over here, braving that ocean. People sick with a disease, cramped in a tiny ship, to come to this land and then trek to the west to find a home. Just recently, my wife and I visited the far west, the mountains of Colorado and Utah and the Death Valley area, and you wonder how these people made it. There we were in a nice rented automobile with restaurants along the way, and still the heat beat down upon us, and the Mojave Desert was blistering hot, and you say, how did these people with covered wagons and horses and children and goods ever cross that territory? So I say, are we indeed descendants of these same people who said, this is our home, we will fight for it and make it ours? And sometimes I find it hard to believe that this country, much like De Tocqueville said, was once pointed out as being the most vigorous and the most self-reliant in the world. I think the real problem with our current national negativism is that it is basically self-defeating. The more we look downward and the more we beat our breasts and expound our faults, the more we begin to believe our own prophecies, and the situation only becomes worse. So if I had one simple message for this graduating class today, it would be this: hold up your heads. It is time to turn this country around, and with the help of many like yourselves, you can do it. Now the cynics will respond, it really can't be done. It takes little thought and no effort to list the reasons why there are not ready solutions to many of our problems. I'm aware of the multitude of reasons why we can't solve this problem today or that problem tomorrow, be it the pollution problem, the environmental problem, the energy problem. You can list the reasons why we can't. And I say that's just tough. You solve them. And I'm convinced you can. And we are not going to improve our lot and change our ways either today or tomorrow unless we have the will to do so, unless we demonstrate the moral fiber and the courage which looks outward rather than inward and downward. And only as we are convinced that we can achieve the goals we desire will we be able to do so. And that will take pride in ourselves and the ability to take on a tough task. I wish that each of us here could sign our own private Declaration of Independence, as those people did so long ago, and end with the words, we pledge to each other, our lives, and our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Now you go back and look at that document, and you see what these gentlemen committed themselves to, their lives, their fortune, and their sacred honor in a concept and in an ideal. And they were proud and they were convinced it would work. In looking ahead, how can we be in a position to change the future really? Or am I only expounding cliches and rhetoric? And I would like to address the remainder of my remarks to that particular question. A hope and a challenge. First a personal hope and then a poet's challenge. My hope is that as college graduates, you will continue to learn and apply that learning to gain a sense of perspective about this country of ours, as well as a sense of realism. And far too often, comprehension and understanding are limited to only a few brief years of our history and our past. And I would say discouragement comes easily if you have a shortened perspective. Learn of this nation, its past, and look at it realistically and honestly. It's not all roses, and it's not all sweet, and it's not all light. We've been through some rough times, some times of which we cannot be very proud, but we have made it. And learn of that to give the perspective, and thereby look at things today in a realistic way as well. Now the poet's challenge. Walt Whitman, who through his poetry sang so eloquently of this country, once set forth a challenge to all who would write and teach others about America. And I would commend these words particularly to those of you who are about to teach. This came about in a poem entitled By Blue Ontario Shores, written in 1856. And Whitman says this: are you he who would assume a place to teach or be a poet here in the States? This place is august, the terms obdurate. And who would assume to teach here may well prepare himself body and mind. He may well survey, ponder, arm, fortify, harden, make light himself, because he shall surely be questioned beforehand by me with many and stern questions. Are you indeed who would talk or sing to America? Have you studied out the land, its idioms and men? Have you learned the physiology, phrenology, politics, geography, pride, freedom, friendship of the land, its substratums and objects? Have you considered the organic compact of the first day of the first year of independence, signed by the commissioners, ratified by the states, and read by Washington at the head of the army? Have you possessed yourself with the federal Constitution? Do you see who have left all feudal processes and poems behind them and assumed the poems and processes of democracy? Are you faithful to things? Do you teach what the land and sea, the bodies of men, womanhood, passion, heroic angers teach? And that is Whitman's challenge to all of us who would sing or teach about America. We cannot adequately plan for the future unless we have a sense of where we have been, where we have come from. We have had our geniuses, our people of great courage, and our dreamers, as well as our fools. Therefore, in understanding our past, not only perspective, but pride as well should be enhanced. And that's my first hope for you. Hope and expectation. Perhaps these words I would replace by a single word: dream. Theodore Roosevelt, in his inaugural address in 1905, caught part of that dream when he said this: "We know that self-government is difficult. We know that no people needs such high traits of character as that people which seeks to govern its affairs aright through the freely expressed will of the freemen who compose it. But we have faith that we shall not prove false to the memories of the men of the mighty past. They did their work. They left us the splendid heritage that we have today." A dream. This country was born in conflict. The Constitution that governs our ways was the end result of much debate and much compromises and much in the way of bitter argument. The political structure that was brought into being was planned to encourage confrontation, to encourage challenge among its components. And our history reflects great struggles among ourselves and with others as we tried to find our way into an always uncertain future. But I would say to you, as we view our past, and even today, we have learned from conflict and confusion. We have been forced to analyze, to reflect, and to decide. And furthermore, there is no end in sight, and this is precisely the important point. So for those of you who say this country and its government are faulty because everything is not smooth, that the decisions are not always precise and sharp, made by a single individual, I say, so be it. And that is indeed our strength. The other ways to govern our affairs can be found, but few that are not more oppressive to growth, that do not take a dimmer view of human potential. Deep down in our social and political structure is an unspoken dream, the dream that people can learn, they can be sensitive, and that they can grow. Now, our hopes for the fulfillment of that dream may be pious. I would not argue that. But I would say to you that dream still lives after nearly 200 years. And whether or not it shall ever be completely fulfilled will be up to people like you and others like you. And if you think that that dream has merit, if you think it can be fulfilled, then you make it a reality. But understand that dream and its potential. Hope and challenge. We are quick to point the finger of blame these days, and I've seen it for a number of years. To blame others for what's wrong, the others oftentimes being a faceless group. To blame the government the schools, the corporations, the unions, the persons of a different creed or a different race and say, you're to blame. And the time has come, I think, to drop that, to re-examine instead ourselves. No country can grow great or prosper if we continually find fault with others and without assuming personal responsibility for trying to correct that which is found wrong. And I say, if there's a cure to that pointing the finger syndrome, I say, don't stop it perhaps. Don't quit pointing the finger, but do it in front of a mirror. Then I think it'll be put to good effect. Again, back to my poet, Walt Whitman. He says, oh, I see flashing that this America is only you and me. Its powers, weapons, testimony are you and me. Its crimes, lies, thefts, defections are you and me. Its Congress is you and me. The officers, capitals, armies, ships are you and me. Its endless gestations of new states are you and me. The war, that war so bloody and grim, the war I will henceforth forget, was also you and me. Natural and artificial are you and me. Freedom, language, poems, employments are you and me. And then he concludes, past, present, and future are you and me. So this is my challenge to you. Learn of this nation, its dreams, its hopes, gain perspective, understand it, know how it functions, that it does function in conflict and confrontation and confusion, but it works. Coming up here in the plane this morning, I looked through a news magazine, and I found this, and I thought it was apropos, so I tore it out, and it says this, something called Tomorrow. It says, in this situation, history suggests optimism is in order. And that's really all I'm saying to you. The time for negativism is over. Long-term, Americans have a way of bouncing back. Since President Kennedy was shot in 1963, the country has gone through its longest and second costliest war. President Johnson, under criticism, didn't seek re-election. Civil unrest shook cities across the nation. The dollar was officially devalued twice. U.S. interest rates have soared to the highest peak ever. Yet in the same period, the country has had its longest boom in history. More people are employed than ever. Monumental changes have taken place in race relations. And through it all, the constitutional process has held unshaken. It is time for optimism. You, as you leave here, will have times of frustration, discouragement, and conflict. And thus it has always been, as I said before. Signs of hope, however, are everywhere, if we will but lift up our eyes. There are more people of goodwill, and more who are unselfish, and more who have good sense and courage, really, if you look around you, than those who lack those qualities. Time and again, this country has exemplified this fact when the challenge was clear. We now face such a challenge. To whom much has been given, and you have received much, much will be required. How then shall you respond? That question I leave with you as you go forth from these graduation ceremonies today. Godspeed and good luck to each of you.
Dr. Hansen, we're grateful to you for sharing your thoughts, and I would say innermost thoughts, as we listen to you. You've certainly given us not only something to think about, but to do as we consider your hopes and wishes and concerns, your challenges. And I'm delighted, sir, that before it was all over, you indicated there is great reason to be optimistic and to have great faith in the future. Thank you so very, very much. Ladies and gentlemen, in most instances, college and university presidents are bolstered in their rather arduous tasks by a helpmate. Now, President Hansen, I'm sure you will agree with me, at least in this public setting, Art, that such is surely the case at Purdue University. And I would like to ask this audience to join me in acknowledging the presence of your charming wife, Nancy Hansen. Nancy, would you please stand so we can welcome you to Ball State? Thank you. Not having done that before, I suspected that there might be someone here, if I didn't say something, who would wonder whether or not the president of Ball State University has his own bolsterer, and let me assure you that he does. And so I would ask you, please, to meet her also, my wife and team member, Mrs. Angeline Pruis. Angie? Thank you, dear. At this time, Dr. Richard W. Burkhardt, Vice President for Instructional Affairs and Dean of Faculties, will present the graduating class.
The Dean of Undergraduate Programs, Dr. Victor B. Lawhead, will present the candidates for associate and baccalaureate degrees.
Will the candidates for the degree Associate in Arts please rise? Will the candidates for the degree Associate in Science please rise?
Mr. President, as Vice President for Instructional Affairs and Dean of Faculties, I present to you as candidates for degrees those who on or before this day have completed or have a reasonable expectation of completing all of the stated requirements for their respective associate degrees. I present the candidates in absentia and those who stand before you.
Upon the recommendation of the faculty that you have or will have completed all of the requirements for graduation and that you have proved yourselves worthy of that honor, now by the authority vested in the Board of Trustees and delegated to me, I hereby confer upon you the associate degrees which you have earned, with all the rights, privileges, and obligations pertaining thereto, and of which the diplomas issued by the university shall forever be the testimony.
Will the graduates be seated?
Those candidates who have completed the 4 years of the honors program, those who are about to receive high academic achievement, are wearing red and white honors cords. Will those candidates who have completed the honors program please rise and be recognized? You may be seated. Those candidates who have achieved at least a point ratio of 3.4 and less than 3.6 graduate cum laude. Will you rise and be recognized? Those candidates who are graduating with at least 3.6 but less than 3.8 are graduating magna cum laude. Will you please rise and be recognized? Those candidates who are graduating with 3.8 or better receive the highest awards of the university. They graduate summa cum laude. Would you please rise, please? You may be seated. Will the candidates for the degree Bachelor of Architecture please rise? Will the candidates for the degree Bachelor of Landscape Architecture please rise? Will the candidates for the degree Bachelor of Arts please rise? Will the candidates for the degree Bachelor of Science please rise?
Mr. President, as Vice President for Instructional Affairs and Dean of Faculties, I present to you as candidates for degrees those who on or before this day have completed or have a reasonable expectation of completing all of the stated requirements for their respective baccalaureate degrees. I present the candidates in absentia and those who stand before you.
Upon the recommendation of the faculty that you have or will have completed all of the requirements for graduation and that you have proved yourselves worthy of that honor, now by the authority vested in the Board of Trustees and delegated to me, I confer on you the degrees for which you are competent, with all the rights, privileges, and obligations pertaining thereto, and of which the diplomas issued by the university shall forever be the testimony.
Will the graduates be seated? The Dean of the Graduate School, Dr. Robert H. Kinker, will present the candidates for graduate degrees.
In the interest of expediency, the master's candidates are already hooded. Will the candidates for the degree Master of Science please rise? Will the candidates for the degree Master of Music please rise? Will the candidates for the degree Master of Business Administration please rise? Will the candidates for the degree Master of Public Administration please rise? Will the candidates for the degree Master of Library Science please rise? Will the candidates for the degree Master of Arts in Education please rise? Will the candidates for the degree Master of Arts please rise?
Mr. President, as Vice President for Instructional Affairs and Dean of Faculties, I present to you as candidates for degrees those who on or before this day have completed or have a reasonable expectation of completing all of the stated requirements for their respective master's degrees. I present the candidates in absentia and those who stand before you. In addition, I wish to present posthumously Mary Ellen Dahl, who unfortunately died prior to this date.
Upon the recommendation of the faculty that you have completed all of the requirements for graduation, that you have proved yourselves worthy of that honor, and that you have accomplished with distinction the first stage of graduate study, now by the authority vested in the Board of Trustees and delegated to me, I confer on you the degrees for which you are competent, with all the rights, honors, privileges, and obligations pertaining thereto, and of which the diplomas issued by the university shall forever be the testimony.
Will the graduates be seated?
Will the candidates for the degree Specialist in Education please rise? Will the candidates for the degree Doctor of Arts please rise? Will the candidates for the degree Doctor of Philosophy please rise? Will the candidates for the degree Doctor of Education please rise?
Mr. President, as Vice President for Instructional Affairs and Dean of Faculties, I present to you as candidates for degrees those who on or before this day have completed or have a reasonable expectation of completing all of the stated requirements for their respective advanced degrees. I present the candidates in absentia and those who stand before you.
Upon the recommendation of the faculty that you have completed all of the requirements for graduation, that you have proved yourselves worthy of that honor, and that you have reached scholarly attainment with high distinction in your field, now by the authority vested in the Board of Trustees and delegated to me, I confer on you the advanced graduate degrees for which you are competent, with all the rights, honors, privileges, and obligations pertaining thereto, and of which the diplomas issued by the university shall forever be the testimony. We have high hopes for you and your futures as members of the ancient and universal company of scholars.
Graduates with advanced degrees will proceed to the platform to cross as their names are called and be invested with symbols of their degrees. 8 candidates have qualified for the degree Specialist in Education. One is with us this morning. David Lowell Beaver, Connorsville, Indiana. I've already presented the others in absentia who for professional or other reasons are unable to be with us today. 3 candidates have qualified for the degree Doctor of Arts at Ball State University, and they will now receive the symbols of their degree. Dr. Ronald Henry Warners, Chairman and Assistant Professor of Music, Curry College, Milton, Massachusetts. Dr. Darrell Elroy Wood, Assistant Professor of Music, Ohio Wesleyan University, Delaware, Ohio. "27 candidates have qualified for the degree of Doctor of Education at Ball State University, and they will now receive symbols of their degrees. Dr. Sam Frank Abram, Acting Assistant Superintendent of Secondary Education, Muncie Community Schools, Muncie, Indiana. Dr. Juma Go Bandawal, Vice President of Teacher Education, Department of the Ministry of Education, Kabul, Afghanistan. Dr. Frank Sumana Conte, Assistant Professor of Political Science, St. Paul's College, Lawrenceville, Virginia. Dr. Robert Arnold Dager, Assistant Director of Student Financial Aids, Ball State University, Muncie, Indiana. Dr. John Stanley Hand, Director, Statewide Facilitator Project, Logansport Community School Corporation, Logansport, Indiana. Dr. Daniel Joseph Hendershot, Assistant Superintendent of Schools, Huntington County Community School Corporation, Huntington, Indiana. Dr. William James Umbani, Professor of Education, Pedro Nun, Lourenço Mark, Mozambique. Dr. Laveria Frannet Hutchison, Assistant Professor of Reading and Assistant Director of the Multicultural Program, the University of Houston, Houston, Texas. Dr. David Lee Jones, Assistant to the Superintendent, Watervliet Public Schools, Watervliet, Michigan. Dr. Hong Young Kim, Seoul, Korea. Dr. Don Carey Locke, Assistant Professor of Psychology Counseling, Ball State University, Muncie, Indiana. Dr. Randall Laverne Mock, Business Manager, Logansport Community School Corporation, Logansport, Indiana. Dr. Jotham Ambisia Lembo, Lecturer, Educational Foundations, Kenyatta University College, Kenya. Dr. Mossy Jesse Richmond, Coordinator of the University College and Assistant Professor of Education, Arkansas State University, Jonesboro, Arkansas. Dr. Salvatore Ferdinand Scaglione, Assistant Professor at Plainfield Junior Senior High School, Community School Corporation of Plainfield, Plainfield, Indiana. Dr. Jack Ray Sublette, Instructor of English, Ball State University, Muncie, Indiana. Dr. Kenneth Earl Wortham, Associate Professor of Biology, Mayville State College, Mayville, North Dakota. Two candidates have qualified for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy from Ball State University. One is present with us this morning. Dr. Thomas Andrew Brown, Assistant Professor of Social Science, Marion College, Marion, Indiana.
To you, the August 1974 graduates of Ball State University, I would add just these few words. Today, you join the well over 40,000, nearly 50,000 men and women who have graduated from Ball State University. And at this ceremony, we celebrate very properly your accomplishments as students. All of us here commend you for your significant accomplishment. But we also quickly add that our expectations of each of you are now the greater. You came to Ball State University to be students. We hope that you leave to become productive and responsible members of society. The world outside will not honor you, at least not for long, for the degree or degrees you hold. It will honor only your contributions to our society. It expects you to do more than merely earn a living. It expects you to put your new knowledge and experience to work for the betterment of mankind. And need I add that it sorely needs you for that purpose. If the university has fulfilled its primary purpose, you will use your education in identifying and seeking to solve a wide variety of problems. And this will come about only as you become personally dedicated to and involved in serving your society and your fellow man. Now, while there are many of you who have earned your degrees by dint of your own efforts alone, I know that there are many in this audience today who have sacrificed some of their own time and resources so that many of you graduates might be in cap and gown on this occasion. Some of them are your parents. Some are husbands, some are wives, several are children, others are relatives, and still others are friends. And I'm going to ask them now to stand so that you graduates might thank them for their efforts on your behalf with your applause. Will those who are very closely related to these folks please stand? Thank you. The warmth of the applause of these graduates indicates what their feelings are. Unless you've been through it, you don't understand it, so we're grateful. Then, too, graduates, may I, on your behalf, thank the faculty and the staff of this university for their significant role in guiding you through those many experiences which have brought you to this place today. The strength and the reputation of any university reside in large measure in the loyalty and in the performance of her alumni. We trust that you will be willing to serve Ball State through your continued interest and support. Perhaps our major vehicle of communication with you will be through the Alumni Association. I would urge you to be an active member of that nationally recognized organization. But we invite you to visit us whenever you can. We solicit your comments about our programs and our policies, for this is one of the best ways we have of evaluating what we are doing. We congratulate you for your past achievements, and we wish you well in your future endeavors, and Godspeed to each one.
After the singing of the alma mater, I would ask that the audience please be seated during the recessional. Shall we stand now and sing two verses of the alma mater?
Dear alma mater, hear our vow of faith and trust in thee. Thy spirit hovers near us now and through eternity. Thy colors true of red and white shall e'er exalted be. We'll honor thee both day and night, dear alma mater. mater, we love thee. Dear alma mater, hear our cry of laud and praise to thee, to bring the honor e'er we'll try, no matter where we be. Fond memories we all shall hold of Ball State, you so dear, though years may pass and we grow old, may alma mater still be